Good evening, everybody. My name's Sam McGill. I'm a facilitator with Sacramento State University's Consensus and Collaboration Program. As the room's getting populated, I just wanted to direct everyone's attention to the slide that should appear up on your screen. For anybody needing Spanish translation services, there are some instructions there. We'll leave that up for just a moment before we move into the agenda. Okay, whenever you're ready, Andrea, let's go ahead and move to the first slide. Thank you. All right, as I mentioned, my name is Sam McGill. I'm a facilitator with Sacramento State University. Real quickly, before we jump into the meeting, I wanted to provide an overview of the agenda and walk through a couple of webinar protocols that will help the meeting go smoothly. The core purpose of the meeting today is to discuss some of the groundwater basin conditions that you all experience in the Petaluma Valley, as well as projects and budget associated with the Petaluma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan. I'm joined by Marcus Trotta, Sonoma Water Principal Hydrogeologist, who will walk you through some information on current conditions. But then really the bulk of the meeting today is going to be spent discussing the proposed fee and rate study. Jerry Bradshaw from SCI Consulting Group will walk you through a series of slides. Throughout the meeting today, you'll notice a few things. First, because we are expecting a large number of attendees today, all of your lines will be muted, and we're really relying on the question and answer function to gain your input throughout the discussion. To access that, on the Zoom controls, you'll see a button that says Q&A. Go ahead and press that whenever you have a question. You can go ahead and tap Ask a Question, enter it into the box, and then tap Send. Staff are going to be monitoring this very closely throughout the day today, and we'll kind of answer your questions in two ways. For some of the other groundwater basins in the area, we've found that there's a lot of kind of common themes and questions that have come up. So at breaks between each of the presentations I just mentioned, I'll be directing staff to answer those verbally, but they're also going to be working very diligently to answer questions via text as well. So if you see your question disappear at some point after you've asked it, just go ahead and click on the Answered tab at the top of the Q&A box, and that will that'll show you the answer associated with each one of your questions as well. As I said, we're expecting a pretty large number of folks today. If your question doesn't get answered or any comments that you make throughout the day, don't worry about it. All of this will be preserved, and the Groundwater Sustainability Agency Board is certainly going to be aware of all of those, and they will be entered into the record as part of a meeting summary of this session as well. So I just want to make sure everyone's clear. If you type something in, it will be captured for the record today, but we're really relying on that Q&A function to get all of your input. As I mentioned, we do have Spanish translation services available. To access those, click on the small globe in the bottom right corner of your screen. We have a translator set up to provide real-time translation of all the slides as we're walking through them. So with that, I'm very pleased to introduce Sonoma County Supervisor and Chairman of the Petaluma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency, David Rabbit. Chair Rabbit's going to walk through some introductory material, and then we will jump into the discussion of groundwater basin conditions. So with that, Chair Rabbit.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate that very much. And thank everyone for being here tonight. Thank you all for coming. We're here tonight to protect our groundwater basin as we face ongoing droughts and climate change. We all know that groundwater is a critical water source for Petaluma Valley. Groundwater is the only drinking water source for thousands of people in Petaluma Valley. We don't want this groundwater basin to look like the Central Valley, as this photo shows. because of over pumping of groundwater, the land surface in the San Joaquin Valley actually subsided or shrunk by more than 6 feet between 1988 and 2016. Just amazing. Wells have gone dry, and today entire communities depend on water being trucked in because their community well or water wells no longer function. These kinds of problems with groundwater basins statewide led to the passage of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, commonly known as SGMA, in 2014. In Sonoma County, the state determined that 3 groundwater basins must comply with SGMA: Petaluma Valley, Sonoma Valley, and the Santa Rosa Plain. In essence, SGMA requires that we locally manage the basin, which is shown on this map. The area is managed by the GSA, Groundwater Sustainability Agency. It's outlined in the dotted blue line and is shown here in the light gray, if you can see that. You can go to the GSA website to determine if you're in the basin as well. You could look up by address there. Local management means identifying, monitoring, and fixing existing groundwater problems that are caused by pumping of groundwater and preventing future problems. An example of what this means can be found in the Drought Emergency Executive Order that Governor Newsom issued on Monday. Order number 9 requires the GSA to provide written approval of nearly all larger well permit applications. In other words, effective immediately, the county, which issues well permits, must get the okay from the GSA before a well permit may be issued for any wells except public water supply wells and residential wells. As required by SGMA, the Petaluma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency was created in 2017. The county, city of Petaluma, and special districts have supported the GSA for the first 5 years through contributions. In total, local agencies have paid nearly $1.5 million to support the GSA. This has been matched by state grants and technical assistance funds of about $2.2 million. And this funding has paid for a groundwater sustainability plan and allowed us to operate the new groundwater agency and to hold more than 50 board and advisory committee meetings and several workshops and community meetings, all of which have been open to the public. And tonight, we will discuss the options being considered to pay for running the agency and implementing the Groundwater Sustainability Plan that was approved in December of 2021. We know that that's why most of you are here, and we don't want to keep you in suspense, which is why we're showing you this slide. Unfortunately, it's a little complicated. The fee study that is underway is looking at a range of options, and to be clear, the board has not yet eliminated any of these options, nor has it selected an option going forward. So as you can see, the range of fee or tax is very, very wide at this point. The actual level of the fee or tax will be dependent on several factors, including the type of fee selected, assumptions that we will make about the funding of the GSA, how much funds the GSA will receive from other sources. The board will weigh these factors along with other considerations, including for taxes, the cost of placing something on the ballot, the likelihood of a voter approval, and how the tax or fee would burden different types of payers. Our fee consultant will get into the details, but we wanted to let you know the numbers right off the bat. We know these numbers are a little scary, and we want to assure you that the GSA board includes rural landowners who share your concerns. We're looking at places where the budget can be tightened and the consolidation of administrative functions with Sonoma Valley in particular and Santa Rosa Plain in order to reduce those costs can take place. I look forward to your questions and comments. The GSA board will be discussing your feedback at our next meeting and as we develop our fee structure going forward. And again, I just want to make sure that everyone is clear. In this particular basin, and this will probably come up, we have fewer parcels overall. so that the costs are spread as far as they can, but not far enough in many ways. So no decisions have been made yet. What we're talking about, what direction to take, and we're looking for your feedback on that, knowing that we need to make sure that we can meet the state mandate and make sure that our groundwater basin is going to be secure going forward. So with that, I want to turn it back to Sam McGill, who's going to introduce our next speaker. Sam?
Great, thank you, Chair Rabbit. And thank you for displaying all of the information, particularly around the fees. I just want to point out to everybody that Jerry Bradshaw from SEI Consulting will be going through that information in depth later, and we'll have the opportunity to ask questions of him. Just a quick reminder, if you do have questions or any comments or input throughout the meeting, go ahead and use the question and answer function that you can find, again, located on those Zoom controls. So at this point, I want to go ahead and introduce Marcus Trotta. Marcus is the principal hydrogeologist for Sonoma Water, and he's actually been working with all of the groundwater sustainability agencies in Sonoma since they were created, and is the primary author of the Petaluma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan. Marcus will walk you through a few series of slides, as I said, focused on basin conditions and a little bit of background on SGMA. But please do keep those questions coming in throughout his presentation. Marcus?
Yeah, thank you, Sam, and thank you all for spending your evening here with us on this important topic. And as Sam mentioned, I'm going to give you kind of a very high-level overview of the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, which was adopted by the Groundwater Sustainability Agency Board back in December and submitted to the California State Department of Water Resources in January of this year. And that plan can be found online. You can see the link to the agency's website at the bottom of every slide, and you can find the plan there. It is a very detailed plan, and I'm going to do my best to distill kind of some of the highlights to you of it this evening. The plan was developed over several years and included feedback from the GSA board, that's the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, and a stakeholder-based advisory committee, which included representatives of rural well owners, environmental interests, agricultural and business interests in those more than 50 public meetings, as well as larger community meetings that were held at different stages of the plan's development. So the plan itself is highly technical and detailed. It does include an executive summary that does give a good overview of everything that's in the plan, and is pretty readable, I think, if you want to get an idea of everything that's included in the plan. A couple sections I wanted to highlight and that I'll be kind of speaking from this evening is section 3 of the plan, which describes kind of the basin conditions and the status of 6 key what are known as sustainability indicators for the basin. And then section 4 of the plan sets thresholds and objectives for each of those sustainability indicators and describes the sustainability goal for the basin, which is intended to be protective of beneficial users within the basin, including domestic well users and sensitive ecosystems within the basin. So I'll start going through kind of the status of each of those 6 sustainability indicators with these next several slides. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So beginning with groundwater quality, and this is measured in the plan by looking at 3 different constituents of concern. They're either naturally occurring or the result of human activities. This includes arsenic, nitrates, and salts. In the basin, groundwater quality is highly variable, but overall is generally acceptable for most uses. While there are some areas that do have water quality problems, these are generally localized and related to either historical land uses or local geologic conditions. Because water quality is regulated by many other state and local agencies and regulations, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act really only requires that GSAs not cause any additional water quality problems through its projects that it may implement or other activities associated with implementing the plan. Moving on to the next indicator, this is land surface subsidence, which is evaluated as to whether it's occurring, the cause, and whether it's permanent or inelastic, such as the situation that Chair Rabbit showed for the Central Valley. Fortunately, in our basin, measurements that have been taken using GPS technology and satellite technology don't find any evidence of land surface subsidence within our basin. However, it is important to note that for each of these sustainability indicators, the state requires that the GSA include a monitoring network to track these conditions going forward. And so that's another important component of the plan, and that's found in section 5 of the plan to demonstrate that these issues don't crop up in our basin. So if you go to the next slide, please. So for these sustainability indicators are really closely related. The first one on the top is the chronic lowering of groundwater levels. And in our in the Petaluma Valley Basin, groundwater levels, based on our available data, are generally stable in most areas. However, there are some wells along the northeastern hills of the basin and northern basin boundary, where we are seeing some declining trends that have been occurring over the past 5 to 10 to 15 years in some cases. But we do have a lot of data gaps in this basin, and there's a lot of areas of the basin that aren't currently covered by monitoring wells, and so that's part of the plan for implementing this plan is to improve our monitoring networks going forward, as I'll describe a little later. The other sustainability indicator here is the amount of groundwater in storage, and that is really related to groundwater levels. But for the purposes of estimating that in the plan, we used a computer model that was developed by researchers at the U.S. Geological Survey for the basin that looks at the amount of groundwater coming into the basin from rainfall, recharge from the mountain front, and a variety of other sources. It also looks at the amount of groundwater leaving the basin from stream flow, groundwater pumping, and other sources. And when we difference those inflows and outflows, you can think of this as kind of a banking account for your water. On average, in recent years, the overall amount of groundwater storage has been relatively stable. A slight decrease due to the drier conditions from the prior drought is something that we have noted. But again, we do have a lot of data gaps associated with trying to quantify the amount of groundwater in storage. Next slide, please. So for these next two sustainability indicators, that's the depletion of interconnected surface water and the inducement of seawater intrusion due to groundwater pumping. For these particular sustainability indicators, we really do have limited data and information on which to base our assessment. We have limited data on the connection between groundwater and surface water and how this connection supports endangered or threatened species like coho salmon and steelhead. And we also need additional information on the connection between groundwater pumping that's under the jurisdiction of the Groundwater Sustainability Agency and surface water that's in our creeks and river, in order to determine whether projects, programs, or possible restrictions are needed to reduce the possibility of any detrimental impacts to surface water beneficial users. Similarly, we have limited information in that interface between the baylands, where we have brackish groundwater associated with seawater and fresher water. And so to better assess whether seawater intrusion is a concern for the basin and to help protect wells in the southern part of the basin, the plan includes doing voluntary water quality sampling from existing wells near the baylands to get a better idea of the distribution of water quality in that area, as well as the construction of new monitoring wells fill those data gaps. And this is kind of a reminder that filling those data gaps for seawater intrusion and surface water connection are a couple of the areas of primary focus for the GSA over the next 5 years. And it is important to note that the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is meant to be adaptive, so that as we collect more information and data going forward, we can modify and refine the Groundwater Sustainability Plan based on that new information. Next slide. So to build in resiliency and to kind of hedge our bets in case of uncertainties such as future climate impact the basin. Excuse me, I have a barking dog here. All right, the challenges of home presenting. So as I was mentioning, the plan is also required to include projects and actions that may be needed to maintain sustainability within this basin. And I'm going to give you just an overview of the types of projects and project concepts that are included in the plan. So it includes the voluntary reduction of groundwater pumping. So this is more your demand management side of addressing groundwater use in the basin. And there's plans to include a voluntary program that would roll out water conservation, water use efficiency tools to well owners. These are the types of tools that have been available to urban users where there are funded programs for water conservation, which have resulted in a 37% drop in per capita consumption regionally since 2009. So types of projects would include anything that increases indoor and outdoor water use efficiency for residences, businesses, agriculture, such as incentives for turf removal, rainwater harvesting, stormwater capture and reuse, rebates for high efficiency appliances, or other types of programs that could be included. Another initiative in the plan is to work with the city of Petaluma to increase the amount of recycled water that's available for use as irrigation within the basin, either as landscape irrigation or agricultural irrigation. That's already been happening, and there's quite a bit of recycled water use that has offset the need for pumping groundwater, but there are plans to expand that to further utilize that recycled water as a resource. And the city of Petaluma has actually just recently received word that they're being funded by the state through a drought relief program, state grant to expand recycled water deliveries within the basin. So already making headway on some of these projects. Next slide. Other types of projects that are a little more at the conceptual level include recharge projects, supply side projects. So one of those is known as aquifer storage and recovery, or ASR. And the concept here is utilizing Russian River water that's delivered to the basin, to the city of Petaluma by Sonoma Water through its aqueduct, and using that wintertime water when it's available, and we have excess water, natural flows within the Russian River that would otherwise go out to the ocean, taking that water and injecting it through wells within the basin, and basically using the groundwater basin as an underground storage reservoir rather than an above ground reservoir. There's been a regional feasibility that was done almost 10 years ago that found that there is adequate wintertime water available for diversion. Even during drier years, there's generally natural flows that are available for recharge. And Sonoma Water and the city of Sonoma over in the Sonoma Valley Basin actually did a pilot study back in 2018 that was successful, demonstrating that this technology is something that could be implemented in our region. And the city of Petaluma, as part of that drought relief funding, also received some funding to study aquifer storage and recovery in the basin. So again, some more headway has already been made and funding being brought in from outside sources to help implement our plan. Another project concept is capturing local stormwater. So this would be, again, wintertime higher flows from the Petaluma River watershed and its tributaries, holding that water either in detention basins where it can recharge the aquifer and also be used for other multi-benefit purposes such as open space. Some of these types of detention basins function as ball fields, parks, playing fields, or grazing in other areas of the state. There's also an initiative to look at flooding agricultural fields. This is something that's being investigated pretty extensively in the Central Valley, and there's interest by many growers in our region to look at utilizing agricultural fields for stormwater infiltration. And there's actually a project up in Alexander Valley that also got funded by the state recently to look at doing that. The GSP also includes an activity to evaluate policy options that the GSA could consider adopting with its authorities or recommend policy options for other agencies to consider. These policy options could include consideration of metering requirements for certain groundwater users. The agency does not have the authority to require metering of your typical residential well, but it could require metering for agricultural or commercial well users. Other policy options could include, when mandatory conservation may be needed. That's something that could be studied and implemented by the GSA as well. And so the idea is to bring different policy options to the board for it to consider for either adoption in the near term or for consideration at a later date, should conditions necessitate those. Next slide, please. So, given that Petaluma Valley is generally in decent shape in terms of its groundwater conditions, I know many people are wondering why the state is requiring that the Petaluma Valley needs to comply with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And so this slide shows kind of the state's metrics. So first of all, the state of California determines which basins are required to comply with SGMA, and they have a methodology for ranking each one into very low, medium, high priority, or basins that are in critical overdraft. And all basins that are medium priority or higher are required to comply. You can see the metrics that they use in that table include things like population, total basin population, population growth, the number of public water supply wells, the total number of wells, the amount of irrigated acreage, overall reliance of groundwater, and then basin impacts. And so a lot of the reasons for Petaluma Valley being required to comply with SGMA are not directly related to impacts in the basin, but to the potential for groundwater use, really. And so I want to go to the next slide, please. So in addition to the projects and management actions that I had described, the agency must comply with SGMA by implementing a number of these other activities shown here, monitoring all those sustainability indicators that I described, working to close those critical data gaps and improve and continue refining the groundwater model that's used to make projections into the future. That's another requirement of SGMA. And then again, because the potential impact of groundwater pumping in streams and endangered species, the GSA will need to coordinate with local, state, and federal resource management agency, as well as water quality agencies when implementing this plan. And then there's annual reporting that's required. So all that data we collect needs to get reported out to the state annually. and those reports are actually due April 1st of each year. So we're just wrapping up our first annual report right now for submittal this week. And then they do require 5-year updates to the plan. Gives you an opportunity to evaluate where the basin's at and make any kind of course corrections that may be needed. And then the community engagement and communication is a key requirement of SGMA, and obviously important to the key to the success of the agency going forward. Next slide. So I just want to give you kind of an overview of the general budget for the Groundwater Sustainability Agency that's included in the plan. And so this is the budget to comply with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and implement the tasks that I just described. The total annual budget is just under about 1.1 million. The budget assumes that the Santa Rosa Plain GSA, the Sonoma Valley GSA, and the Petaluma Valley GSA will jointly share the cost of studies, projects, outreach, and updates where at all possible. The budget will fluctuate over the 5 years, where some years it'll be less and some years it'll be higher depending upon the activities that are occurring. And Jerry Bradshaw, your next presenter, will discuss how that budget was smoothed to allow for a fee that doesn't fluctuate every year. And we'll also describe some of the assumptions and possible grant areas where grant revenues may be able to help out in meeting some of these budget requirements. So the purpose of this slide was really just to give you a sense of the overall magnitude of the costs and where they fit in terms of the implementation of the plan. Next slide. So we know this is a lot of money, and so you're probably asking, how does this benefit well owners in the basin? And so while the GSA will not be maintaining or installing private wells, this is still the well owner's responsibility. The agency's job is really to protect the overall groundwater basin and ensure that the groundwater levels remain high enough so that your well has water available to pump. Benefits also include the protection of the amount of groundwater in storage, groundwater quality from problems that occur when there's overpumping of the basin. Over time, as we learn more, the GSA will help protect the basin from seawater intrusion and help prevent streams from having impacts from groundwater pumping. Finally, it also allows the basin to retain local control. If SGMA is not implemented, if the GSP is not implemented, the state would come in and take control of the basin until the GSA is able to assume control and begin implementing the GSP. And as Jerry will describe, they would also charge fees for those activities. So I believe that's my last slide. I'm happy to answer any questions on what I covered. Just a reminder that your next presenter, Jerry Bradshaw, will be providing information on the fee study options and considerations, as well as our current estimates on groundwater use by the different water use sectors within the basin. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Sam, I think.
Thank you, Marcus. Yeah, just scrolling through the questions, I know that staff has been diligently answering a bunch of those. Several of them do pertain specifically to the rate and fee study, though. So, I just want to make sure everyone's aware we are tracking that. And I think a lot of Jerry's material is going to answer those. But we'll hold those questions for now and then come back to them after Jerry's runs through his slides. There are a couple of questions, though, that I was hoping you might be able to answer. One is kind of about GSA authority, specifically for new permit applications who have high potential water usage. Will those be placed on hold? Does the GSA have the ability to limit, or regulate installation of wells?
Well, until earlier this week, I would say no. The SGMA legislation and regulations have kind of a clear separation between the Groundwater Sustainability Agency's authorities and land use agency authorities. So the GSA does not have land use authorities, nor does it have well permitting authorities. Those remain with the county or cities that have those authorities. SGMA does require that the GSA coordinate and share information with those agencies to inform their land use planning decisions. And but with as Chair Rabbit noted, the governor's recent drought executive order does include a requirement that the well permitting agencies get written approval from groundwater sustainability agencies for any proposed well permit within the SGMA basins, excluding rural residential wells for what are known as de minimis users and public water supply wells. So that is a bit of a nuanced question answer, but that is some new information that's just come about.
Thanks, Marcus. There was another question specific to basin conditions that I know Ann answered, but in a nutshell, can you tell us or give us kind of an estimate for what the annual average overdraft is for the basin?
In this basin, the overall water budget indicates that conditions have been pretty stable over time, and there hasn't been much of a deficit in terms of the loss of groundwater in storage. One thing that is important to note is that SGMA does not require you to really manage to that loss of storage number. SGMA requires that you demonstrate sustainability by monitoring for all of those 6 sustainability indicators. So the groundwater levels, water quality, subsidence, and such. And there are thresholds and objectives that need to be met to determine whether you're sustainable or not. Right now, the basin is in a sustainable condition when we compare where groundwater levels and all those different indicators are in relation to those minimum thresholds and measurable objectives.
Great, thank you. The other thing that I would just point out for participants, there is a link under the answered questions and answers. If you do have more specific questions about the basin setting and basin conditions, we really encourage you to go to petalumavalleygroundwater.org. There you can find a link to the GSP, and specifically section 3 of that GSP focuses a lot on everything that Marcus went over. A lot of really great information for anybody who wants to learn more about basin conditions. One final question, more about kind of the structure and authority of the GSA, and I don't know if you or Ann might be able to, or maybe even Chair Rabbit could provide some information, but who has oversight over the GSA? How is it? How is the GSA board structured? Is it a joint powers authority, a separate agency? I was just wondering if you could provide a little information on that.
Hi, I'm Ann Dubé, and I'm the administrator of the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. And the agency is a joint powers authority. It was formed with the city of Petaluma, the county of Sonoma, the Sonoma County Water Agency, the Sonoma Resource Conservation District, and North Bay Water District coming together. And so we have, and it's posted online, the kind of the rules and regulations around the joint powers authority and how it's governed and how it's structured. And we have lot of different policies that the board has approved regarding spending and purchasing and all budgets and all those kinds of things that are available if you have more questions. But the GSA board, which is chaired by Supervisor Rabbit, has the ultimate authority over the GSA.
Thank you, Ann. And if possible, just in case people would like to see it, maybe we can get that link posted in the chat for everybody. All right. So with that, I know that there's a lot of questions and comments specific to the fee, but I do think a lot of these are going to be answered by the next presenter. So with that, we'll go ahead and transition over to Jerry Bradshaw from SCI Consulting. Jerry?
Thank you, Sam, for the introduction. I'm happy to be here to talk to the community about the fee and rate study and the status of that work. We're going to be talking about 4 different topics tonight under my portion, and that talks about the funding sources. What are the different sources that we can consider for funding this effort? We'll look at groundwater pumping data, because a lot of the funding options work best when it's done proportional to how much water is pumped. So we're looking at that data, which is very complex. We'll look at the costs, what Mark has showed us earlier, and take another version of that and see where that goes. And then finally, we'll throw out some preliminary options for funding and some of the rates that would go with them. So the rates you saw up front, mentioned by Chair Rabbit, are just one of the options. There's a few other options there too. On the next slide, we'll kind of look at the funding sources. We put these into 3 different categories, and I'll go through each one of them one by one. The first one is grants. This is money that would come from typically the state, and that can, we've actually used a couple of grants so far getting the GSA to this point, and we're hoping in the future that some grant funds will be forthcoming to help with some of the efforts that Marcus talked about earlier. As I mentioned, these typically come from the state. Ultimately, the people who would pay for those grants are all the taxpayers across the state, which is a pretty large universe of taxpayers to fund these efforts. The next group is the GSA members. As was mentioned earlier, there's 4 agencies that are members of this GSA. And one option is for those members to fund all this directly from their own coffers. We've kind of divided those into 2 groups: water agencies, which in this case is just the city of Petaluma. And if they were to help fund this, they could actually pass that cost on to possibly their water customers. Otherwise, it would have to come from probably their general fund. But the county and the other agencies, the conservation district, they have no customers to go back to, so they would just have to bear those costs out of their own general fund and maybe to some extent cut back some other services in order to fund this. And the third category are the beneficiaries of groundwater. These are the groundwater users. And the first subset of that are the actual property owners that are directly reliant on groundwater. They either have a well or they are hooked to a well for their own water needs. The other way to look at this is all water consumers within the basin. So this would include city lots that are on city water that would maybe share in the cost. So we'll look at all those options as we go forward. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the well owner metrics. The first portion of this talks about the rate classes. We've divided all the different well users into 5 different classifications. The municipal and other public service providers, which is primarily the city, and then there's a lot of other smaller pumpers that are technically public providers through mutual water companies or smaller groups like that. Agriculture and other irrigation is another category. Rural residential, these are residential properties that are outside the city system and rely on groundwater for their domestic use. There's some commercial properties spread around outside the city that would also be categorized. Urban wells is an interesting category because these are properties that are within the city's water delivery system, but they're known to have wells. So there's some assumptions made about how those wells are used, and that's another category. Down below, we'll show you there's two basic ways we estimate the water pumped. For the municipal and other public systems, they're required to report all their pumping to the State Department of Drinking Water. And we have access to that information, so we can go by the actual pumping of the city and those other public systems. But for all the other uses, the agricultural, rural, residential, and so forth, we have to just estimate the pumping. And we do that through a couple different methods, and we'll talk about that in a moment. If you go to the next slide, we kind of see a pie chart that's showing how our estimated pumping breaks down by these categories. In the blue, those two small blue pieces, that's the large public, which is the city of Petaluma, and then all the other small groups. Those two added together make up about 10% of the water pumped out of the ground. Agricultural is the biggest piece of the pie, coming in at 55%. And then turf irrigation, such as golf courses and schools and such, is another 11%. The rural residential, there's a lot of them out there, but they pump just a small amount each. So that adds up to about 17%. And then commercial and urban irrigation bring up the last 6%. The urban irrigation shows 0 on this pie chart. That's not the true number. It just rounds to 0 because it's a fairly small number. It's a little bit less than 0.5%. So there are some urban irrigators out there. We think there's about 120 to 130 parcels that use urban irrigation. So that's how everything breaks down. As I mentioned before, only the blue sections are measured. So with the next click, we can see that piece of the pie. That's what is metered. We have actual data on that. The other 90% of the pie is estimated. So you can see the dilemma. It would be nice if we had information on all those other uses, but if there is information out there, it's not made public, it's not available to us. And we suspect there's a lot of wells that simply aren't metered. They're just put in and used, and that's perfectly all right and natural, but we don't have information on those, so we have to estimate those. So the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about how we do that. The first group is talks about the different categories. For agricultural and other irrigation, we have pretty good information on what crops or type of turf is grown on the properties and how many acres each of those crops cover. And then we also have information from the state and other industry resources that tell us how much water each one of those crops require in order to survive and thrive. So we apply those numbers to the acreages of the crops, and we come up with what that property would probably need in order for the crops or the turf to survive. So it's more of a water demand rather than an actual water usage. For rural residential, we have a series of studies that all kind of point to one number, and that number is 1/2 of an acre foot per year. And we'll get into more detail on that. So that's what we assign to rural residential. Commercial and urban wells are a little more complex, and that varies by land use. Let me give you some examples of how these calculations work out. The first one is 50 acres of vineyard. What we apply to that is a 0.6 feet per year to those 50 acres. Now, let me explain what that means. In the Bay Area, we see anywhere from 14 inches to 20 inches of rain per year. That's how much water comes down on the whole surface of the Bay Area. 0.6 feet is approximately 7 inches. So for a vineyard, that vineyard owner would apply another 7 inches of water over the acreage of his crop in order for it to thrive and survive. So if we apply that 0.6 to 50 acres, we come up with 30 acre feet per year. So that's the water demand that we estimate for 50 acres of vineyard. So that's a good example of how we do this. The other next example is 100 acres of pasture. Pasture, we apply only 0.04 feet per year, or 1/2 inch of water per year. And that's mostly to sustain some livestock that might be pastured on that land. So if you apply that to 100 acres, you come up with 4 acre feet per year. For 100 acres of grain, that's considered to be dry farming. We allocate that 0. So we estimate no water usage from groundwater for grain. In the rural residential, as I mentioned, is a ½ acre foot per year, which equates to 446 gallons per day for a residential use. 2/3 to 3/4 of that would probably be internal domestic use, and the rest for some outdoor use. I want to mention the last bullet there. We believe we have some pretty good data on who receives surface water or recycled water for those parcels that are outside the city service area. So what we do is we credit that. So for instance, that 50-acre vineyard, if that owner gets 20 acre feet of surface water delivered to them, then we would reduce that 30 acre feet down to 10 acre feet. And that's what would be the groundwater demand for that parcel. So we think we have some pretty good data on surface or recycled water deliveries, and those credits are built into all of our estimates on a parcel by parcel basis. The next slide shows a table of how many acre feet we believe are being pumped per rate category. Right now we're showing a range for each one because we're still working on the data. We're very close to being done, but we're still turning a few dials and bringing that to what we think is our best estimate. As you see at the bottom entry there, it's offsets for alternate sources. And you can see in this basin, there's 500 to 700 acre feet of surface water or recycled water that offsets some of those demands you see up in the agricultural or in some cases turf irrigation. So those are applied, and the net value of the net total demand for the basin is between 2,200 acre feet and approximately 3,000 acre feet per year. Incidentally, those numbers line up pretty closely to the Groundwater Sustainability Plan that was submitted a couple of months ago to the state. So it's nice when our approach, which is on a parcel by parcel basis, lines up with the basin plan, which was done on a macro basis. And for those two numbers to line up was good news, I think, for both estimates. So let's look at the next slide, and it goes into the budget. So we've talked about the pumping numbers, but let's look at the budget. You see here in the white column, that's that $1 million annual budget averaged over the next 5 years. But we talked a little bit about grant funding, and we've used grants for the budgets up until this point, and we're hoping to get some more in the future. So we've broken that $1 million into 2 columns. On the right in green, we estimate about $445,000 in grants could be available and applicable to our task at hand, which leaves about $609,000 left that would still have to be funded locally through some sort of GSA fee structure. So that's about 40% of our total budget. Looks like it could come from grants. Now, before we go any further, I just want to reiterate and stress that the grant funding is only estimated at this time. The first and next grant application cycle will happen hopefully in the fall, and we won't know how that will go until later in the year. So this is very aspirational at this point. It's possible we get no grants. It's possible we get all of this grant funding. And it's possible we get somewhere in between. So the 2 numbers at the bottom, the $1 million and the 609,000, those are the 2 options that we would have to fund locally within the basin through one of the mechanisms we talked about earlier. So I want to have you keep those 2 numbers in mind, because those 2 numbers are the basis for the rate ranges we'll talk about later. We'll see a low rate or a high rate for each of the options. Those correlate to the 600,000 or the million. So if we go click about 2 or 3 clicks, I think, to get to the next slide. This is the rate calculation if we go with the fee like they've done up in the Santa Rosa Plain area, where you charge on a per acre foot. This is likely the default mechanism, although we're still considering the other mechanisms. But you take your total budget of either 609,000 or a little over $1 million, and you divide it by what we estimate to be about 2,600 acre feet per year. And that comes with those 2 numbers, about $230 per acre foot or $400 per acre foot. So that's an example of the fee calculation. It's actually quite simple. once you get all the costs and all the pumping data put together. But there are some other options to look at. So let's look at those now. The first, we've got two families of options. Option A is fees that are assessed to the 1,250 or so parcels that rely strictly on groundwater. The first one is the regulatory fees. This is the one I showed you the example of earlier that results in either somewhere between $230 to $400 per acre foot. So who pays this? All the groundwater pumpers, which includes the city, the farmers, some businesses, rural residentials, and so forth. On the upside, this is very proportionate to the amount of water pumped. We've seen some comments tonight in other times about how agricultural is the big pumper and they are a big part of the problem. Well, under this scheme, they pay a proportionate share. Every parcel that uses higher water or lower water would pay higher fees or lower fees. So that's one of the upsides of this. We also have an example in the Santa Rosa Plain. They adopted their own fee in 2019. That's exactly like this. And as I mentioned earlier, the credit for recycled or surface water usage is built into this estimate. Obviously, on the downside, these are very high rates, and we understand that, and we're working very hard to look for options to reduce these through cost savings or other funding sources as we finish up our next couple of months of work here. So some examples, that 50-acre vineyard would be looking at between $6,900 to about $12,000 per year to help fund this agency. The 100-acre pasture would be lower, but still about $920 up to $1,600 per year. And the rural residential would be paying somewhere between $115 and $200 per year to help fund this. Again, those are quite high, we understand that. Another example here would be a flat fee that would just be applied to each property that has well water used on it. And this is not proportionate. This would be the same for every parcel. So it's simple, it's easy to understand, but on the downside, it's not proportionate to the amount of water pumped. And those rates would be anywhere from $490 up to $850 per year. And under this scheme, that 50-acre vineyard would pay the same amount as a rural residential. So that's out there. It's something that we have on the table right now. One last thing on this slide is the state intervention fees. Marcus talked a little bit about this earlier, and the fees that would come with state intervention is $300 per well. So that's similar to the wellhead fee I mentioned just a moment ago, plus $40 per acre foot. So they would charge a combination of both of those fees, although the rates are quite a bit less than what we're talking about above. So while those may look attractive from a dollar point of view, state intervention is not a long-term solution. It's not an off-ramp from this future that we're showing here. It's just a speed bump. You eventually have to have the agency come in and do the work that it's required to do, and you would still be looking at some sort of funding mechanism in the future. So that's a summary of the state intervention fees. It's not really an option we're considering, but is something to compare and contrast with what else we're talking about. On the next slide is our option B, and this is a tax or assessment that would apply to all 19,500 or so parcels throughout the basin. So it'd be the 1,200 pumping parcels as well as all the other parcels, mostly city parcels, that lie within the basin. So to spread this pain evenly over a much broader base brings the rates down quite a bit. As you see here, they would range from $28 to $55 per parcel. This would be in the form of a parcel tax, and it's the lowest number we've seen here, but it also requires voter approval, a 2/3 special tax approval, which is a very high threshold, very hard to get past in this day and age in the state. In addition to that, other downside is that it can't be implemented until year 2. So the first election you could get this put onto would be probably this coming November. And by that time, the fiscal year has already started and it's too late to gather revenue for this fiscal year. It'd have to start in year 2, which means you'd have to come up with an interim funding plan for the first year. In addition, the county elections office charges any agency that puts a ballot measure on the ballot. And this could be $150,000 to $200,000 additional cost, which is currently not in the budget. So there's cost to this, there's risk, political risk, obviously it might not even pass. Another option would be a benefit assessment. This again requires voter approval, although it's only a 50% threshold to pass. And it's not by registered voters like the November election. This would be a landowner election, and it's the property owners that vote per property, but their votes are weighted by how much their fee would be. And what we would probably propose, because there are strict proportionality requirements for benefit assessment, is that we'd go back to a per acre foot charge. So the pumpers who pump a much higher amount of water and would have a higher fee, their vote would actually count that much higher than, let's say, a rural residential that would have a lower fee. So it's a quirky little election system. It's used widely, but not so much in groundwater, although it may come into favor more and more as we go forward. This would also have a high cost to implement. We're guessing $100,000 to $150,000. And once again, this wouldn't be done in time for the next fiscal year. So again, it would be a year 2 and beyond option. There's also some quirks with this, some strict requirements. So we're still doing some legal review, although we think there is a path forward for a benefit assessment, but again, requires voter approval. Let me give you some examples of the rates with this, since it's a per acre foot. The 50-acre vineyard would be $1,600 to $2,800. The 100-acre pasture would be $220 to $384. And the rural residential would be $28 to $48 per year. All of these are a per year charge. So that's the summary of the different options that are out there. All of those are still on the table and worthy of consideration. So there's that. So let's go to the next slide and we'll kind of go through the procedural requirements. These are the next steps that are required to get us to some final resolution on this. This is a fairly compressed schedule, and it's assuming that we actually go forward with a fee this year. This is what we need to do. We're just finishing up March right now. So March and April was set aside for the first round of community meetings. And of course, we're working with staff and liaison groups all the way through. April would be a board meeting where we would take what we hear from the community tonight back to the board, as well as the status of our fee work and the data work we're doing in April. And then in May, there'll be another community meeting here in this basin. And then we'd be back at the end of May for another board meeting to consider all the information gathered, all the different rate options, and hopefully set a rate and schedule a public hearing for June, when you would have the public hearing and have the final adoption of whatever fee the board decides on. This is all in order to get this into the county tax collector for property tax bills. They would just simply use the tax bills as a method of collection, since those bills already go out to property owners. And as most property owners are aware, there are other direct charges on those bills. So this would be another mechanism. And that deadline for that for every tax year is August. So that's our goal, is to have this done, if the board sees fit to do it, to have it done before the end of June, when the fiscal year expires, in order to get it on the tax bills. The next slide is a list of upcoming meetings. As I mentioned, the end of April, there's a board meeting. We have another community meeting scheduled for May 12th, and that will be an in-person meeting this time, although I think the location is not yet figured out. So we'll keep you posted on that. There's an advisory committee meeting that actually happens the day before that, on May 11th. And then the last 2 board meetings in May and June are listed here. And those are all afternoon meetings all the way through. So with that, I just want to summarize what Marcus and I have given you tonight in this presentation. The 2014 Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA, requires agencies to form. It requires them to define their sustainability and develop a plan. And then it requires them to achieve sustainability, which is the implementation of that plan. Implementing sustainability requires projects and actions, which Marcus talked about, the data gaps, the monitoring and reporting, communicating with the public like we're doing tonight, and updating the model, and of course, every 5 years, a plan update. The community benefits, just to recap those, with this funding structure, we get to retain local control of the groundwater basin. Primarily, we get to protect groundwater levels and work very hard so that wells won't go dry. Prevent future harm to animals and plants that are dependent on groundwater, and finally, protect water quality and combat seawater intrusion, which can spoil a groundwater aquifer pretty quick, and even potential land subsidence due to groundwater pumping. Recap of the rates: the regulatory fee ranges from $230 to $400 per acre foot per year. The wellhead fee would be $490 to $850 per parcel. The parcel tax much lower at $28 to $55 per parcel, but requires voter approval. And the assessment would be in the $55 to $96 range per acre foot per year, and again requires voter approval. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Sam so we can look at questions and hopefully take this discussion a little bit further. Thank you, Sam.
Great, thank you, Jerry. All right, so you did answer some of the questions that have popped up throughout your presentation, but it might be helpful to recap. Option A is just the fee that the acre foot fee you mentioned. Option B includes the parcel tax and parcel assessment taxes. One of the user notes that the fee seems similar to the county's fire prevention fee that did not pass muster with Prop 13. Have you looked into that issue at all, and how is the proposed fee different from something like the fire prevention fee?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. My firm was actually involved kind of on the tail end of that fire prevention fee. We understand it was very controversial. This is different in that the SGMA Act specifically provides powers for these agencies to put fees in place. Of course, they still have to comply with the Constitution, primarily Prop 26. If you're interested in looking that up, that's the most defining criteria for whether something is a tax or isn't. And I think in this case, when we're applying a fee directly to the people who pump the groundwater, we're well within the SGMA's intent that this is just a regulatory fee and does not require a vote. I did mention a couple fee options that do require a vote, and those are the ones that we go to everyone within the basin, which is more akin to the fire prevention fee. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the difference there.
Great, thank you. And just to be clear again, so the partial tax, that requires a 2/3 majority of the voters. The parcel assessment, that's just 50% of the actual parcel owners. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. You did mention that at least for option A, the first fee, that is proportional based on water use, at least the way it's currently envisioned. Is that correct? So in that case, a vineyard pumping more than a rural residential user would pay more under that?
Right,
option?
the vineyard would be at 30 acre feet, a residential used to be a half. That's a 60-to-1 ratio between that vineyard and a rural residential.
Mm-hmm. And I see that Ann's answering it right now, but is the Petaluma Valley, is that the only basin considering fees like this, and as they implement their groundwater sustainability plan?
No, all three of the sister basins are considering fees, as well as many, many others around the state. There are many, many GSAs that are in exactly the same boat and wrestling with this. So you're certainly not alone.
Let's see, another question. Does agricultural irrigation include livestock water? And you mentioned that was factored into the, was it the pasture estimates?
Right, it's a small amount. But yeah, that is factored into the pasturage. So I think that's covered.
Great. And just so everybody's clear, the fees, that option A that you mentioned, that would be assessed on all parcels, not on all wells. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that again. Parcels that are not what?
So for that option A, that you had it separated out into parcels and then a wellhead fee.
Yes.
So with the parcel fee, that applies to all parcels, not all individual wells. Is that correct? I just note that one user points out that some properties have multiple wells on their property.
That's an interesting question that probes a little deeper. And that's actually a good opportunity, because what we're modeling here, we're not charging you for the water you're using per se. We're charging you for what the agency is trying to do to help protect the groundwater. And we're trying to find an equitable way to distribute those costs. So we're modeling the groundwater demand for each parcel. So whether you have 5 wells on a large parcel or 1 well that serves 5 parcels, it doesn't matter. We're looking at what those parcels, what that land coverage, those acres are demanding to grow vineyards, orchards, pasturage, whatever. So we're modeling based on land use or agricultural use, regardless of how many wellheads. On the fee, we're looking at per parcel, because again, we don't have a good data set for how many wells are out there or exactly which parcel they're on. So that's why we're going to this modeling effort and looking at demand.
Thank you. Obviously, just a lot of general concerns and questions about the concept of the fee generally. I encourage staff to take a look at those. I'm just trying to find other specific questions you might be able to answer. In your estimates, and we already touched on it, pasture grain was assumed to have a 0 acre-foot per year estimate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the pasture, most of that, or a good portion of the amount that you estimated, was specifically for livestock watering on that property?
Correct.
Even if the pasture itself is dry land grazing?
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you. All right. I believe that is all of the specific questions that have been asked. Again, a number of concerns just about the idea of a fee being charged in general. But I'm not seeing other specific questions. I certainly encourage people to continue to let those roll in. We are way ahead of schedule right now, and Jerry's was the last presentation on the docket. Here's a very good question. It sort of relates to some that were asked earlier. How do you know your modeling is correct? You mentioned that it's based on studies, but can you talk about some of the data sets that were used for your estimates?
Yeah, the data sets are actually pretty extensive. And honestly, I'm not the expert on the data sets. There's other people on the team who aren't on the call right now that can go into the details. The modeling, correct is an interesting term, because I'll be the first to admit that our model is imprecise. It's certainly not perfect. It's just a method to get towards as close to fair as we can. But we do have different studies and different recommendations by industries on what typical crops require to thrive. And those are modern methods of irrigation and modern studies and estimates. So we feel like we're fairly well up to date. If someone's using an out-of-date irrigation method, maybe using more water than they should, that's not picked up. They're getting away with a little extra water, I suppose. But it's not perfect. It's just a way to try and distribute the cost the best we can. I will also state that it's our intention to, if we get this far, is to have an ordinance or a resolution that allows for appeals. So if you come into the agency and say, I've been assessed as a vineyard, but I'm actually something different, or the acreage is wrong, or some of our data points are wrong, we expect that there'll be an opportunity to correct that, which will then correct the fee that goes along with it. So the fees will be calculated on the data we have. If the data needs to be corrected and you have some evidence of that, I'm sure there'll be a way to get that corrected. Now, we understand that some people may be overcharged by what they actually have going on. And if we correct that, that will lower their fee. If someone's being undercharged, we realize we're probably not going to hear from those folks, and that's fine. That's about the best we can do with the data we have and the method going forward.
Thank you. I see Marcus is answering it, but sort of related to that question, how do you estimate what's being grown and where? Where does that information come from?
Actually, Marcus is going to be a lot more knowledgeable on that than I am. I can let him finish typing unless he wants to jump in and give his keyboard a rest.
Sounds good. Yeah, so those estimates are derived from land use mapping that's conducted by the State Department of Water Resources. They publish crop maps. The most recent is from 2018, and that's the primary source for the type of crops that's grown on specific parcels. And then there's also data sets from an older study by DWR, which indicates the source of irrigation water for specific parcels that is also incorporated into the database.
Great, thank you. And a lot of that information is included in the GSP, is that correct?
Yeah, the GSP relied on similar types of assumptions.
Thank you.
But again, the work that's going on for the fee study is a more focused parcel-based calculation and approach.
Right, thank you. And I believe both of you you mentioned this just a little bit, but can you talk a little bit about credits, or what plans are for credits moving forward for things like recharge?
I'll start with the credits for recycled or surface water delivery. I think we've covered that pretty well, that those are factored into the best. We think we have pretty good data on that. Again, we're open to hearing if we got it wrong. And we do expect there'll be a public facing GIS system so people can go into that here in the next couple of months and look at the exact data that we're using for their parcel. So we're hopefully opening up that portal here in the next few months and get corrected on that. As far as credits for recharge, that's more complex, and I'm going to pass that to Marcus.
Yeah, so the topic of credits for recharge is certainly something that has come up, and it is something that is being explored in other and piloted in other areas and basins within the state. So it is something we're certainly taking a look at and trying to learn from what others are doing. There's been some pilot projects down in the Central Coast and the Pajaro Valley that have advanced pretty far, that we've been looking at. Currently, there would need to be site-specific information or local information made available to determine what the actual benefit for that recharge would be for if a landowner wanted to do a recharge project, and there would need to be a way to kind of quantify that benefit in terms of how it benefits the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, whether that recharge occurs on soils that are permeable enough to infiltrate into the underlying aquifer, whether that water helps raise groundwater levels or contributes to stream flows, base flows and streams. Those are the types of benefits that could be realized through those types of recharge projects. So I'd say that is something that certainly could be considered and incorporated down the road should the GSA board select kind of this extraction based fee methodology.
Thank you. There's a series of questions, and I think both of you touched on this as well, about whether or not fees will be passed along to municipal and private water companies, in addition to agricultural, rural residential, the other groups that you mentioned. One user in particular asks if some of the water agencies are in a position to raise water prices and pass some of that along to their customers. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the expectation for how fees could be imposed or passed along to public and private water systems.
Well, under the regulatory fee, that per acre foot charge that we led off with in the options. We would also charge the city and the other public agencies for what they pump. And they could pass that along to their customers. They probably will pass that along to their customers. But it would only be the portion of the water that they provide their customers that comes from the ground. So if 80% of the water comes from the Russian River, for instance, then only the 20% would see this increase, which again gets diluted into a water bill. So we've tried to do some estimates, and the pass along charge is just maybe $1 a month or less. I mean, it doesn't look like it would be very much, because the public agencies are only using 10% of the groundwater that we will be assessing this fee on. So the math kind of shows it gets diluted, but we anticipate that they will have to pass that along to their customers, as small as it might be.
And you had mentioned that those public and smaller and small private water systems, that's the one data set you have that's based on actual metered pumping. Is that correct?
That's correct. Although even that has some quirks. The pumping, particularly the city, relies on their pumps as an auxiliary water source. And when the Russian River deliveries are down, they may turn the pumps up in a drought situation more one year than they would another year. So we're using probably a 5-year rolling average. That's what we're leaning towards right now. So we would take the most recent 5 years for which we have data and use that as their amount that they would be charged for. And then every year we would roll it ahead to the next the most recent 5 years, and alter their charge each year as they go. Great,
thank you. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but we are joined by Gina Benedetti Petnick from Petaluma Power and Water Utility. Because we're talking about city utilities and water, Gina, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
Thanks, Sam. No, I don't think I do have anything to add. That sounded consistent with my understanding in terms of, the percentage of our groundwater use and what that pass through might look like to ratepayers. I think that was a great characterization. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right. See Ann and Marcus responding to a couple of other questions here. Clayton, I'm sorry, not Clayton, Jerry, the estimates you used for city pumping rates, was that based on a particular year?
Well, the number we're showing right now is based on an 8-year average. We'll probably shorten that to the 5-year average in the final edition of the data. So we are using actual reported amounts averaged over 8 years.
Great, thank you. Here's a very specific one. I don't know if you can answer it, but how would a 6-acre property with diverse ag zoning be assessed? Would that be assessed as rural residential or agricultural usage, if there's kind of mixed usage on the parcel?
Yeah, I don't think our data is dependent on zoning. I think we're using crop maps that Marcus mentioned to determine how much of your acreage is in the different crops. And if some of it has no crops in it, then it's either pasturage or just left as part of the residence, assuming it has a residence. There's a lot of rural parcels that, of course, don't have a residence on them. So some parcels can be, we have many parcels that have multiple crops. There may be some vineyard and some pasture, and then a residence, and occasionally maybe even a commercial purpose on a few of them. So one parcel can have many different slices of the pie, depending on what we see in our data.
Good, thank you. All right. I certainly welcome staff to take a look at some of the other comments. I believe most of the questions have been answered, or there's an answer in progress right now, but if staff wants to take a look at those Q&As and see if there's anything that you'd like to answer verbally. Otherwise, I do encourage people to keep sending questions in. We have quite a bit of time left here. It's a very specific and potentially hypothetical issue, but if a homeowner has an old well that can't be used for drinking water, and it's either capped or retired, would they still have to pay for that well if it's no longer in production?
Another good question. As I mentioned earlier, as much as we'd like to rely on the actual wells, we just don't have the best data. So we've gone to the crops that are on a parcel, knowing that they're not hooked to city water. They have to be getting it from the ground or from direct surface deliveries or recycled. So we have pretty good data on the crops, pretty good data on the alternate sources. So it doesn't matter if they even have a well, if they are bringing well water in from some other well source, it's not directly tied to a well. So it would be nice if we had that data. I think we could do maybe a little better job on some of our data estimates, but it's just not data that's available.
Thank you. All right. Throughout the conversation today, there's been a number of questions about and concerns about using estimates as opposed to kind of hard data and information, presumably from metered, meters being installed. Do you have any sense, and this might be getting too far down the rabbit hole, but do you have any sense of what the cost would be for that? Is it, what's the reasoning for relying on estimation instead of, asking people to install meters?
Well, I'll just start with the first part, that the data just isn't there now. If as far as moving to a more metered world in the future, I really don't have good information on that. I don't know if Marcus has anything to add. I know it would be a large project to meter all the ag wells, for instance, and there would be cost involved, obviously, but I don't know how that would operate to the point where we could switch over to an actual system instead of metered. Halfway there doesn't really get us very far. Yeah, Marcus.
It is one of the the policy options that I mentioned that would be potentially considered by the GSA board, as it does have the authority to require metering for users that are not rural residential users that use more than 2 acre-feet of water per year, essentially. So that is something that could be considered in the future, and it would be better information, but the GSA board would have to kind of weigh the pros and cons of the cost of a metering program, as well as other factors.
Great, thank you. All right, just looking for any new questions that you haven't spoken to yet. All right. We'll certainly continue to answer questions for the next few minutes. In the meantime, Andrea, I wonder if you might put the slide up again that has some of those upcoming meeting dates. Just want to remind folks, this is the last opportunity to provide input on the rate and fee study. It would be helpful to display that again. Okay. So as we note, there is another community meeting coming up Tuesday, May 12th at 5:30. That will be an in-person meeting in the groundwater basin. All right. I know that both of your presentations spoke to this a little bit, but can Marcus and Jerry, can you speak a little bit to the likely benefits? What will people get for the fees that are being charged or being proposed?
Marcus, I think that's more in your bailiwick, if you don't mind.
Yes, I think Ann just typed a reply to that. So some of those benefits include maintaining local control of the basin, not ceding control to the state. The plan includes those measurable objectives and minimum thresholds that are set to be protective of well users. I didn't go into great detail, but for example, the minimum thresholds that are set for for groundwater levels, incorporate, the best available information we have on well depths that are near these monitoring points that are being monitored, so that if groundwater levels start reaching depths where they could impact people's wells, there are certain actions that would be required by the GSA in order to correct those problems. There are voluntary conservation programs, incentives that are being included as some of the projects, as well as developing better information for basin groundwater users on the condition of the basin, and hopefully providing kind of early warning on any future problems that may occur are some of the benefits that I think should be pointed out.
Great. And you'd previously discussed projects and management actions. All of the information you just mentioned is explained in more detail in the GSP. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Great. So just for everybody's education and edification, I really do encourage everyone to take a look at that GSP when you have the opportunity. I did just post a link to it in the chat, and I think that's a really useful resource to understand what the GSA is, what the GSP is proposing, and kind of the implementation plan for getting there. All right. Taking one final scroll through the comments. One user asks if they were required to meter in the future, do you have any estimate of what it might cost to add a meter?
Those costs can be pretty variable depending upon the well size and type of meter, but I would say anywhere from $500 to $1,500 for a reliable meter is probably a reasonable range.
Thank you. All right. Why don't we leave the questions open for just a couple more minutes here? And we'll move on to some closing comments. Okay. Well, again, I just want to reiterate, this isn't the last opportunity to hear about the rate and fee study before the GSA board considers a final option. At this point, I'm seeing questions slow down coming in. I do want to hand it back over to Supervisor Rabbit for closing comments. David.
Thank you very much, Sam. I apologize earlier. I did lose my internet connection, so I had to find my way back in. So apologize about that. But I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending the meeting. Special thank you to you, Sam, for facilitating, to Jerry for joining us and explaining the options available for how we raise money to pay for this endeavor. But most importantly, to Marcus Trotta, Ann Dubé, Jay Jaspers, who's not with us tonight, but Sonoma Water, truly great work and really leaders in their field statewide on this issue. So very much appreciate their expertise. I will say this, if you indulge me 1 second, no one, including me, wants to pay a new tax or fee on something that we have had access to. The tax or fee has to deliver something in return, in my opinion, and while no one can guarantee your specific well will not go dry, I hope that you can see some benefit from the basin as a whole being monitored for quality and quantity. How much that should be is the question, and I can assure everyone listening that I feel I can speak for the GSA here. The Petaluma Valley GSA will look to decrease ongoing costs and look for fund sources other than through direct fees and taxes. Those state grants that were mentioned earlier, legislation, I know that discussions are already taking place, and even potentially county funding to buy down the costs, something I can tell you that I will bring up during our own budget discussions. It won't pay for everything, though, I can tell you that. And we are a bit frustrated in that the Petaluma Basin is pretty damn healthy overall. ever so slightly overdrafted and some contaminants in certain areas, some saline intrusion along the bay and the river due to the tidal action. Nothing that we really didn't know. It is unfortunate that SGMA was drafted in a one-size-fits-all approach, and we're required to meet the same standards that basins that are really in much worse case are required to meet. But with that, we know if we do not manage our groundwater basin locally, the state will come in and manage it for us with undoubtedly very little public input, and from what we understand, a much higher cost overall. And I will say this lastly, whether you live in the city like me and have water delivered through the city water resources, or you're a rural residence with a well or a rural residence with an agricultural business, we all share the same aquifer. Its health is important, I believe, to all of us. And like I know my colleague Bruce Sabelli-Amon wrote on the Q&A feature earlier, I also strongly feel that the cost, the pain as it were, should be spread far and wide and shared by all, because we all do own the aquifer in that regard. We're going to be discussing your feedback at the next GSA board meeting. We also look forward to seeing you in person at the second community meeting, which is on May 12th. You are more than welcome to join us at our regularly scheduled GSA meetings as well. I would encourage you all to stay involved, make your opinions known. And as Sam, I believe, mentioned earlier, I encourage you really to read through the data in the plan. And it's only together that we can figure out the best path forward, given the statute and our unique situation here in Petaluma Valley. So again, I appreciate everyone being with us tonight. We have more work to do, some important decisions coming forward, but I guarantee there's a lot of people working on it, and together we can find that sweet spot, as it were, and make sure that we can take care of our aquifer and do so in a way that is affordable. So thank you all. Appreciate the participation tonight.
Thank you. And thank you all very much for attending. We look forward to seeing you in the future, as Chairman Rabbit said. I do see that there's a couple more questions rolling in, so I welcome folks to hang on for another couple moments. I see that Anne's typing out an answer, but we'll go ahead and wrap up with the formal presentation. And if you'd like to stay on for just another couple of minutes, you're more than welcome to. Thank you all.